So it appears as if Steven Croowder has been demonetized from YouTube. For those of you that haven't been following the story, journalist, and I use the term loosely, more like an activist for Vox, named Carlos Maza, tried to reach out to YouTube publicly and say that he felt harassed by Steven Croowder because Crowder apparently made fun of his sexuality because he's a gay person, and perhaps made fun of his ethnicity and just had offensive things. And so he pushed for YouTube to do something to Crowder. When it appeared as if YouTube wasn't going to do anything to Crowder, he said that he was basically trying to suggest an ad boycott and people to boycott. And so eventually it seems as if YouTube capitulated, and not only did they demonetize Crowder, but it appears they're going to be going after other things. The problem is, as a private platform, sure, they could do whatever they want, but I'll get into the gray areas of what's going on here. But the problem with anything private or public is that you just want a clear example and equal enforcement of what the rules are. So just tell us exactly what we can and can't say according to your rules, and enforce that regardless of people's political ideology. When you don't do that, then you're no longer just a platform. You're making conscious decisions, and you're a publisher, which opens you up to different legal venues. And so look forward in the future to, there's going to be lawsuits that come out as a result of this, because big surprise, as with all the other tech companies such as Twitter, Facebook, other places like that, it turns out that YouTube is selectively going after conservative people as always. Now let's look at the broader picture for a second of why this is going to be important. I talk about all of our cultural institutions of power and influence quite often, and how they're all predominantly controlled by ideologies that are the establishment left wing or the establishment Democratic Party. So let's go through with what I mean by these cultural institutions of power. It's the institutions that shape public thought. And there's many of them, but here are most of the prominent ones. You have things like the entertainment industry, actors, athletes, things like that, singers. You might say, oh, really? But yes, we know through research that there's heavy influence on people based on what celebrities are doing. That's why it's so prominent to get celebrities to have endorsements of things and products that you see on commercials, because we know that that is a big influence, particularly on younger people. That's all completely dominated by the establishment left-wing party. We have academia, which is shaping minds and shaping the future employers, anyone who goes to universities, even K through 12 academia at this point, all dominated by establishment left-wing ideologies. We have things like the mainstream media, which, as I talk about often on the show, dominated by establishment left-wing ideologies. And now Silicon Valley was kind of the last bastion where you started to see conservative voices, because they needed somewhere to be able to speak. And I talked about before, it wasn't enough for the Democrats to be able to control. Again, when I say Democrats, I don't mean you necessarily, that's my friend out there, the average person. I mean the establishment, powerful people controlling the Democratic Party. It wasn't enough for them to control the mainstream media, academia, to be able to control the entertainment industry. They need almost total control. And so that's why they freaked out about fake news and Russian trolls and things like this. They acted like that was the biggest thing. But what I've said all along is, if a couple dozen Facebook trolls were enough to swing the election by using Facebook and Twitter, then what happens when the actual companies of Facebook and Twitter are operating on behalf of the Democratic Party? If a few trolls using the platform, we're led to believe, was enough to steal an election, what's it mean when the entire platform and the people that run it are censoring conservative voices, going into bat for Democratic voices, etc.? So we can see how this could become a huge problem. The other thing is, when you silence people this much, there's inevitably going to be a backlash. I hope the backlash takes a positive form and we start to see other platforms open up that are more open. I don't want to see conservative platforms, because that's really bad. If we can't talk to each other on the same platforms, conservatives, liberals, progressives, capitalists, socialists, if we can't have these conversations on the same platforms, then we're really fracturing, and it could really lead to actual real-world harm and violence and anger and things like that. So I don't want to see a competing platform that's just, and this is the conservative platform. I want to see a competing platform that's like, we're for free speech. Progressive, Democrat, liberal, Republican, Green Party, constitutionalist, we don't care. That's what I would like to see. So hopefully that's the positive angle it takes. Negative angles, it could take things like I was saying before, where when you feel like you're silenced and shut up, you start to go to darker places. You could start to see Republicans or conservatives, and you do see some of them doing this, start to advocate the same thing in kind. Well, then if you're going to censor these people, then you need to censor these people on the left, and things like that. I don't want to see that. I think I'm for free speech. But that's the danger of what you're going to start to see. Now, the selective enforcement, that's the issue that I think so damning. One, it's the vague nature. We have no idea what is hate speech, what is offensive. Anyone could be offended by anything at any time. So if enough people come together and say, hey, here's 50 of us, we're going to start, we're very upset because we don't like the fact that Robert Knorr in his channel, uses gender-specific pronouns. He should always default to they and zer and things like that. Who's to say? Oh, they could genuinely feel offended. We're not supposed to care about that stuff. We're supposed to care about free speech. And so we don't know exactly where the line is. What can you say and what can't you say? And the other thing is it's clearly selectively enforced. So with Crowder, he's not allowed to make jokes. Now keep in mind, Steven Crowder is a comedian, right? He's making jokes. I find some of my favorite comedians are incredibly offensive comedians, such as Norm Macdonald, who's maybe not the most offensive, but he certainly had some dirty jokes and some offensive jokes, racially, sexuality, weight, looks, things like that. Kind of maybe some misogynistic jokes. Doug Stanhope would be another in that vein. You have your George Carlins, your Bill Hicks, people like that, your Lenny Bruce's. Again, I talk about this, for me, comedy is a very important thing. And it used to be that in the times of Lenny Bruce, who's one of my personal heroes as a comedian, he was fighting against kind of censorship coming from the right, where he was actually arrested over and over again for being too profane, for profanity and things of that nature. Now we're starting to see the very people that cheered for him and stuck up for him on the left, they're now the ones saying, no. Their technical oligarchs are saying, we need to censor all comedy, particularly when it's coming from right-wing sources. That's terrible. That's a terrible thing. When we can't laugh at ourselves and you can't joke at yourselves, then we're heading to a very dark place. Now, you might say, yeah, but Steven Crowder had a shirt that says socialism is for fags, and that's uniquely bad. Well, it all depends on how you look at it. Like, he's not out there advocating violence. He's not calling us... He's not using that term like somehow saying that these people like need to be eradicated or punished or anything like that. He's using it to insult people. I've heard plenty of comedians say it. For example, we had Stephen Colbert, and you excuse my language, but he said that Trump's mouth was Putin's cock holster. Now, he's still allowed to be on YouTube. He's not demonetized on YouTube. And his parent company is actually working in partnerships with YouTube, the channel that he works for. YouTube's all about all these media angles and all these media companies that they're trying to get mainstream and push. So where's the boycott? Shouldn't that parent company be demonetized until Stephen Colbert is taken off? And there's plenty of other examples we could give. Now, not only that, it seems funny that they're taking this hard line against jokes and things, and only when it comes from right-wing people. Sure, they'll throw a bone and maybe get rid of the odd left-wing people, but overall, we can see what the numbers are. We know. The data is there for everyone to see. But it also seems as if they're focused more on jokes and words than they are on action. So, Carlos Maza, you might say, I feel bad for him. Steven Crowder maybe picked on his sexuality. It sounds like he's a terrible victim. Just last week, he was out saying that advocating for the assault of conservatives, saying that you should grab milkshakes and throw them on them. Now, you might say, you consider that assault? Yeah, it's not the end of the world, but physically throwing an object on someone, that shouldn't be allowed. That should be a line that we draw in the sand to say, no, you can't advocate for that. And no, we're not going to allow that on the platform. That's technically assault. And if that's not a big deal, then how are words a big deal or a t-shirt a big deal? So YouTube's going to take a hard line against Steven Crowder making fun of someone for their sexuality. But when that person says, hey, we want to deplatform conservatives, which is he said, hey, we want to throw objects on them in public, which is he said, that's perfectly fine. That's the kind of double standard that I'm talking about. Now, what are going to be the ramifications? Like I said, one, I hope the positive ramification that comes from this is enough people need to get fed up. You need to, I'm not monetized, by the way, on YouTube, but if you are, you need to diversify and get on other platforms. I hope that more platforms come about, but spread yourself up. Don't allow yourself, or if you're a YouTuber who makes a lot of money from it, or that's your central career path or something, you need to diversify. Don't be at the whim of a company that could any day decide you're one of the deplorables and you need to go out. That's happened to people, and that's tragic. So try to diversify what you're doing. I hope more platforms come. And I think you're going to start to see real things. Here's two things I would like to see happen. I would like to see sort of an internet bill of rights that says that these areas are sort of social squares at this point, because the market share of places like Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube is so incredibly huge that we need to be able to reasonably have people not be kicked off for political ideologies, because if we do, then we're just getting one group, and that's going to be able to shape elections and things like that, and we'll end up with sort of a corporate oligarchy, even more so than we already have, where the people that are running Facebook, Twitter, and Google and YouTube, they're going to be able to basically control who's going to be able to be elected on a grand scale, and those people in turn will probably have favorable policies towards these companies, which basically means these companies end up running the show. So that's something we need to look out for. I think I mentioned this earlier, but we know that this is powerful. We've seen studies that show how Google, for example, which I believe is a parent owns YouTube, Google has the ability to swing elections because just by changing their algorithms of their search, how they're able to influence what the average person's able to look up to, and it could skew how they view one candidate over another or one party over another. So the fact that they're leaning towards one side clearly at this point, and we can see from released emails how their staff have all said, oh, we're left-wing people. We see through their actions of who they're censoring that it's usually predominantly conservative voices that they're censoring. And so we see the dangers of that. So I think we do need kind of, even though I'm someone who normally believes in more free market, we need the government to step in and have some sort of internet bill of rights and say people can't be kicked off for just ideological reasons, or it needs to at least be evenly applied to both sides. If not, here's what I think you're going to start to see: a twofold thing. One, I think that, as was said with Donald Trump, you hear people say this on the left all the time. They said, oh, the Russian trolls were enough to influence the election, and all the free time that the media gave Trump was basically a campaign contribution. So even though Hillary spent way more money from all these contributions she got, the fact that the media was giving Trump this free press coverage was basically a contribution. Well, if that's the case, then having the biggest companies in the world with the most social influence be on bed with the Democratic establishment, they're no longer a platform. They're now giving in-kind donations to the Democratic Party, and therefore should be held accountable to campaign contribution laws. If they don't report those contributions and those donations, and remember, we've seen specific emails from people from Google and other places showing that they're trying to tilt the scale in the favor of Democrats in specific elections and overall in general. So therefore, they're now campaign contributors, and they should be held accountable for both them and the Democrats if they're not reporting how much they're donating, the value and things like that. The second thing you'll start to see, I think, is you'll start to see that because they're not a platform and they're now acting as a publisher, that when someone publishes something that leads to a real world harm, and I don't mean my feelings were hurt because someone called me a bad name. I mean, when we start to see actual people make threats on there coming from the left, the Antifa type people, or people like this Meza guy that's saying, yeah, go ahead, throw milkshakes. When someone goes too far, you're going to start to see people file lawsuits. It's like, look, YouTube can no longer make the argument, we're just a platform, we're not responsible for what people put up, because they are selectively enforcing what they allow and what they don't allow. In this case specifically, they know that this Mazak guy actually suggested advocating for assault to people, yet instead of punishing him in any way whatsoever, they follow his lead and go after the person that he wanted them to go after. And so when someone operating on Mazak's behalf actually attacks someone and escalates from a milkshake to something else, I don't know that these lawsuits will win, but it seems to me to be a solid argument. You intentionally let that material up there. You've now started to say, it is our responsibility to police this material. And so because you've said that, and you've left ideological people that you agree with that are in violation of that, and you knew of it, which it'll be able to be proved because enough people say, hey, this person violated on the left, and YouTube won't take action. Now YouTube could theoretically legally be in jeopardy and being responsible as a publisher of some of that material. So it's a really, I mean, if you're trying to look on the bright side of this, hopefully this starts to wake up people. And it's not just conservatives that are waking up. You start to see people that are progressives, that didn't buy into the Russia collusion, that are anti-democratic establishment, like Jimmy Dore, Glenn Greenwald, Aaron Mattei, other people on the left that are waking up saying this is ridiculous. Allowing these corporate oligarchs to kind of control our political discussion is terrible. We need more of a free speech type environment, even if they hate Trump and they disagree with almost everything I would say. And certainly you see people that are kind of in the center, such as people in the intellectual dark web, like Eric and Brett Weinstein, Dave Rubin, Joe Rogan, others like that I think, Tim Pool, who has an excellent video on this, that are starting to say, like, look, this is a huge danger. This is corporate censorship. It's going to lead to some very bad things. It's going to lead to more division. So, I mean, we effectively have now corporate media is controlling YouTube. YouTube is going out just like they do with Twitter and with Facebook. YouTube just operates at yes, please tell us who to go after next. Just like this person who deigned to make a video making fun of Nancy Pelosi, and he needed to be doxxed and needed to be gone after. Oh, and incidentally on that, Bette Midler just posted fake news that someone published about Trump and comments he made. Yeah, I don't recall people from the Daily Beast going after Bette Midler or going after the people who try to find out who the person was who made up that fake news. Isn't that weird? Isn't it how they're always selective? Not to mention when they doxed a bunch of kids at Covington and covered up for a bunch of adult racists yelling at those kids and selectively edited and put material out to make those kids look like racists who then receive death threats and have the rest of their lives, where they try to get into school and things like that will be affected. No coverage there, no outrage there. So, yeah, just my general take on this, it's really bad. Hopefully new platforms open up, but look to see more conservative voices, more people taken out. It'll be bad for politics. It's bad for comedy in general, where now everyone says, oh, anything that's slightly offensive, that needs to be censored. Why is this coming from the left now? The left used to be my ally on this. When we were arguing with people like Lenny Bruce being great, Bill Hicks being great, George Carlin being great. Where are they now? Now, Trump's bad, so yeah, no more comedy. It's ridiculous. So, hey, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. Recommend me to some other people, and I'll be putting more material out weekly. So, thanks a lot, and have a good one.